Good afternoon. This is the Devar Torah on Parshas Mattos-Masei. It's actually a double parsha, two parshiot. It's the last two parshas in Sefer Bamidbar, the fourth book of the Chumash of the Torah. Now, the reason it is this year double parsha, doesn't happen every year, is because the Parshas Devarim, the first Parshas of Sefer Devarim, must come out for Shabbat Chasam, the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av. And the two parshas cover quite a bit of detail. They are actually they are the biggest double parsha. Between them, it's 244 pasukim. To give you an idea, Naso, which is the biggest single parsha, is 68 pasukim shorter. To summarize briefly what is going on in the parshas, it begins with Moshe telling the heads of the tribes the whole laws of Nidarim, oaths, and vows, and when the vows and oaths of a married woman or a single woman, if she's still in her father's house, can be canceled, or if she's betrothed in intermediate stage. And the Parsha then goes on to describe Hashem's commanded Moshe, take vengeance on Midianite, and then you'll be gathered to your people. Now, Moshe could have delayed it, stalled it. What does he do instead? He immediately organized the army for the next day. And all of the kings of Midianites, plus Balaam, plus others, are all wiped out. Moshe becomes very upset because his command was he was supposed to kill all of the women who were above the age of 3, let's say, and because they're the ones who had entrapped the men in the first place, the Jewish men at the sin of Baal Peor. In any event, he then ordered they be killed. There's a whole division on the division of the property that was captured. And after that, very interestingly, the two tribes of Reuven and Gad, they had very great livestock, so much livestock that they gave, that they wanted to not go into the holy land of Israel. They wanted to stay on the other side, not crossing to Eretz Israel, Eretz Canaan. And why? They said they had great cattle, great sheep, they had great livestock, and they figured the land on the other side was better for grazing. It's therefore, for materialistic reasons, they were willing to forego it. Moshe was at first reluctant. He only agreed that they could have that if they went ahead of the other armies, helped the rest of the 9.5 tribes capture their land in Eretz Israel proper, and then they could go back. Put it mildly, their priorities were skewed, because they said, we'll build holding places for our livestock, and also cities for our women and children. Moshe, when he corrected them, went the other way. They undertook to make the vow, and we learn from here how conditional vows and unconditional vows work. And then half the tribe of Menashe was also there. Now, why the tribe of Menashe? I will be shortly explaining the deeper meaning of this whole incident. The Parashat Mattos-Masei, the second parsha, then goes on to describe the 42 journeys taken by Bnei Israel when they were in the desert. Now, these journeys come into two categories. I'll be getting back to this also shortly. Those that happened before the sin of the Moravian spies, and those that happened afterwards. And they can be understood on a number of levels. After those 42 journeys are summarized, it then talks about what the inheritance of the Levium. They're not going to be given a separate chunk of land. What they're going to be given instead is 48 cities distributed throughout Eretz Israel. And these 6 cities were going to be specifically designated, and all 48 in general were going to be cities of refuge or a miklat. If somebody negligently kills somebody, not deliberately, not with intent, malice beforehand, they were fleeing, they could flee there, there'd then be a trial, and if the death was accidentally negligent, they were allowed to stay there. They had to stay there. The Kohen Gadol died. There's all different discussions. He goes into it in great detail. But if somebody deliberately killed, they have to. They will be subject to. They will be subject to being executed either by the Sanhedrin, or in some cases by the family members once that determination is made of the victim. It ends with the heads of the tribe of Gilad, of Menashe, approach Yosef and say, of Yosef, tribe of Yosef, came to Moshe and said, look, this is not fair. The daughters of Zelophehad are part of our tribe. If they marry men from another tribe, the land will go from one tribe to another. And Moshe asked Hashem what to do. They were told to marry men from their own tribe. They wound up marrying their cousins, and they were older when they got married. They still managed to get married and have children. In any event, it completes it. Now, those laws of not a woman having to marry within a tribe only apply to the Gemara Baba Basra, to the first generation. Now, after the summary, I would like to go back to Parashat Mattos. Now, very big question. Besides the fact that those 2 tribes, Reuben and Gad, had skewed viewpoints and were very materialistic, as I said, put their property over their wives and children, according to the Likutei Torah, there's an even deeper reason going on here, because the nature of those 2.5 tribes were different reasons, were unstable now, and not properly should be going into Eretz Israel. With Reuven himself, when he conceived on his wedding night, Yaakov thought he was with Rachel. Rachel had given the signals to Leah so she wouldn't be embarrassed, because so she saw prophetically the tribes was supposed to come from her and Yaakov, and it's from Leah and Yaakov. And therefore, even though he conceived the child that night, he thought it was with a different woman. That kind of conception can have a negative impact. Therefore, Reuven was unstable, and that led to his materialistic inclinations, and why they weren't fit to go in there. Now, what about the tribe of Gad? You see the same thing again. Now, Gad wasn't a child of either Leah or Rachel directly. When Rachel couldn't have children, she asked Yaakov to also marry Bilhah, and 2 children were produced from her, which was quite fine. He was aware of it. and they were tribes of Dan and Naphtali. Now, interestingly enough, when Leah saw that she wasn't giving children, so what did she do? It said she took Zilpah, her maidservant, and gave her to Yaakov as a wife. Now, what's the problem with that? Because, and I'll read you the exact class of the Torah, Leah, ki amda meledet, the tikach et Zilpah shifka, Tain ata leYaakov leisha. When Leah saw that she had stopped giving birth, she took Zilpah, her maidservant, and gave her to Yaakov as a wife. Sounds fine, except there was only one little problem. She never told him that she was doing that. So that night in Mindar, Yaakov thought he was with Leah. She was actually with Zilpah. That produced a child named God, was conceived that night. And again, you have the same instability resulting from such a union, even though Yaakov did nothing wrong in either case, and therefore he wasn't to be admitted either. Now, what about the tribe of Menashe? Different story there. Now, Menashe was a son of Yosef. Now, as a son of Yosef, Yosef was a Tzaddik Omer. So what's going on here? Pharaoh gave Yosef Aznat as a wife. Now, Aznat, as explained in the Likutei of Torah, who was Aznat? She was a child that resulted from the kidnapping of Dinah by Shechem, and therefore, while Yosef was a complete tzaddik and he only had kedusha, Aznat was a mixture, because half of what she spiritually came from in genetics was from Chumah, which was klipot, spiritual impurities, which Hashem is trapped, and it's impure. And the other half was Yosef, which was pure. So, and this also explains another issue. So what happened was, one half of the tribe of Menashe, the tribe of Yosef, which was Ephraim, came from Kedusha to Kedusha. And in the tribe of Manasseh, however, it was split because some of the Manasseh carried two traits. One was a mixture of purity of Yosef with the klipot from Shechem, and the other one, the slight half of that tribe, carried purity of Kedusha of Yosef with the Kedusha of Aznat through Dinah. In any event, therefore, that's why when Yosef took his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and he put Manasseh on the right because he was the firstborn, and Ephraim on the left, Yaakov crossed his hands. Yosef assumed because he had poor vision, that was the reason. He said, no, I know who I'm blessing. Even though there will be the descendants and important people from Manasseh, Ephraim is going to be at a higher level, because I said mine came from the completely pure sides of Aznat and Yosef. Therefore, for that reason, in those klipos and purity, he couldn't. And again, that's why that half tribe was not allowed to enter Eretz Yisrael. So you see, this whole subject of klipot, spiritual impurity, is significant. Now, we see also something else, that, in other words, how one action, event in this case, the conceptions of these three, how significant an impact that can make for that generation and descendants, with a ripple effect that goes on quite widely. And we're seeing that on the greater level in Parashat Mattos-Masei. Now, the first 42 Pesukim are dealing with the 42 places we journeyed in this in the Bar Midbar. Now, as I said, those journeys were divided into two types: those before the sin of the Meraglim, and those after. Those were punishment, because that generation that believed the lies of the 10 spies were not, the men 20 to 60, military age, were not allowed to enter Eretz Israel. That's why they had to be in the Bar Midbar for a total of 40 years, never the original plan. Now, they can be understood in a number of ways. They can simply be listing the 42 places, though what's very interesting is they have different times. Some they stayed a couple of days, sometimes they just passed through, sometimes they spent years. And what's the significance of that? Now, these 42 journeys can be understood in a number of ways. The Likutei Torah, different Likutei Torah, this time of the Baal Tanya, the Alter Rebbe of Lubavitch, pointed out that these 42 places were guideposts where different significant things happened to the Jewish people. And it's also these 42 places quoted on the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidus, in which the Alter Rebbe of Chabad was one of his disciples, that those 42 places, it's beyond the scope of this Torah to go through them, but in the writings of the Baal Shem Tov shows that each one of these 42 points, or we all have them, and these 42 points consist of what we're supposed to do during our lifetime. That's on another level. Now, the final level I'd like to deal with is, question is, why these different times in the journeys? Now, because there was something very important. When it started in Egypt, when we were in Egypt, Egypt was one of the most impure, spiritually impure places. The people, Jewish people, by their suffering and their numbers, helped pull the sparks of Kedusha out of the klipot, the spiritual impurities that powered Egypt. Now, to explain the klipot very briefly, the klipot began when Adam and Chava committed the sin. There were spiritual impure elements. A lot of the neshamas that fell into the sparks of Kedusha that would have become souls fell in to there and had to be removed from there. The ones in Egypt were removed, as I said, by the presence of 600,000 Jews and of their suffering. Now, it was supposed to be very different. This is partially based on our time. It was supposed to be very different in Bar Midbar. There, it was the Kedusha of the Torah combined with the 600,000 people, men, combined with Hashem's presence, the Shekhinah, and the Mishkan. All of those elements together were going to remove the tumah and release the holy sparks of neshamas. Now, why was that why was that an issue of different times? Because forces of tumah, impurity, like to inhabit desolate areas of the world, and the Midbar was a very desolate area, and so they only stayed there long enough to take the sparks of Kedusha and the souls that came with them from the four impure forces, the klipot. Now, depending on the choice we had made, we said, we need all 40 places to get rid of all the impurities. That's because we had to wander had to go for 40 years because of the sin of living in Ragli. What would have happened if they hadn't believed that? Then, explained by Orchaim and others elsewhere, the first journeys would have taken the sparks of that part of Sinai, of Bamidbar. What would happen to the rest? When we entered Eretz Yisrael under Moshe, if there had been Sinai Meragli, all the sparks of Kedusha that were trapped in the Klipot would have come out not only of Bamidbar, but would have come out from around the world, because the Klipot impurities are distributed all over the world. By making the choice we made, just as we saw Klipot created problems with Reuven, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh, we see the same thing here. Because we didn't do that, and we went into Eretz Yisrael, even then, if we hadn't sinned in the time of the first temple and stayed there, hadn't gone into exile, again, the sparks of Kedusha would have come out automatically from Klipot. But since we didn't, we had to go to the different nations of the world where our Torah combined with our suffering was going to help us pull out the pure souls, these holy sparks from the Klipot. Now that we've been virtually lived B'nai Israel around the world, that era is coming to an end. And Be'ezrat Hashem, whatever sparks need to be removed, will be removed soon by our final sufferings here in Eretz Yisrael. And then with the redemption, all of the rest of the sparks will come back to us with Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.